in interest of getting someone that's actively working with young people, has done it, you know, Keep Love and things that he's done. You know, we wanted to get his involvement. So what Malcolm has agreed to do is December 29th, which is a Thursday, and January 5th, which is also a Thursday. He's going to do the reaching out, and here in the community center, you know, we'll supply like pizza and soda, chips or whatever he thinks, and he's gonna get a group of kids and we're gonna talk about their, maybe kids that are away at college that are back. And that's kind of, you know, what we'd like to get.
Basically talk about what they liked and what they didn't like.
Right, and, you know, what choices, what part of their choice for high school, if they had to do it over, would they have chosen something different? And what, and.
One of mine might show up.
Both of mine might show up, I don't know.
Yeah, so Malcolm, he says he's got a, you know, a resource for that. So we just need to think if that's a good idea, to give Malcolm the go-ahead to gather his troops.
I don't think it would hurt.
I will be around, I'm not gonna, you know, run over him, but.
I mean, if he's willing to market it.
Yeah, he's willing to do the marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi
And
there.
get on the phone and call some of our kids.
Yeah, so a concern that someone did bring up was making sure that we test kids that didn't go to college. You know, and why, you know, so that we would reach not just kids who had gone away to college. So we're gonna do that. So what I was saying, James, is that the 29th of December, which is a Thursday, 6 o'clock, Malcolm Badger is going to work with, you know, have a group of kids here, the demographic of that 20-something-year-old kid, and kind of do some, you know, conversation with them. I don't know, conversation listening, whatever 20-year-olds call it.
Yeah.
You know, you may be better on the vernacular since you see younger people than I do. But I'm sure it's kind of that idea of the listening group.
What time is that gonna be?
6 o'clock.
I don't think you're gonna have many people home yet at 11:29.
December 29th.
Oh, December 29th, sorry.
Yeah, right after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's. And then again, the 5th of January were the two dates he posed to me.
To do both or to pick one?
He said he would do both. And I think it'll be a matter of maybe kind of what response he gets.
Yeah, and who's around.
Who's around, when they are, 6
Yeah.
o'clock's a good time. So that's where we are with Malcolm. So Malcolm is technically helping with the group. You know, we're trying to make accommodations to use the people that we have, get as much information as we can. So, all right, so I'm gonna go back to the beginning. We need to approve the minutes from the October 17th meeting.
Give me a motion for that.
I
And
don't think we can.
I don't think you
why?
can.
We don't have a quorum?
Well, we're actually, you're officially on the committee.
Yes,
right?
he's officially.
So we have 3 on the committee,
Oh, okay.
but I'm gonna abstain.
All right, you're gonna abstain. You were here.
I wasn't here.
No, not really. No, that's right, you weren't here. All right, well, we can't then. We won't. Are you gonna take notes?
I'm taking notes, yes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so we won't. But anyway, welcome to be here this evening. I'm not sure, I didn't hear from Sasha that she wasn't coming, so hopefully she will. And Erica said she might be running a little bit late. So I think, did you get to see what, Kevin? It's up on the drive. Do you know how to access the drive?
I only saw the drive on the one that Jess sent me back in the middle of October.
Okay, so,
Are you talking about this report card?
no, the report card I sent you, that I came in an email. This is on the drive. I just said it a second ago. It's on the drive.
Does it automatically update each time?
I
Or
think,
maybe I didn't see it.
I'm not a techie.
Which one was that?
The,
Yes.
it was a list of questions and definitions
I have that.
and those
Yes.
type of
Formatted
things.
and printed.
Yeah,
So Kevin worked on this document, thank you so much. A lot of work went into this. And that's one of the focuses we wanted to, look at this document, see if there's areas that, we need to get more clarification on. Hey there,
Hey,
cup of
how are
tea.
you? This feels very official.
And you weren't here last time either, so we won't.
All right, we're in the big
Those
room.
minutes will be in limbo for now.
We were questioning whether we have a quorum.
Yeah, we weren't sure, and you weren't here for the minutes last time anyway, so, all right.
But this is not a decision-making group.
No.
You can have less than a quorum. It's a recommendation group, so you can still have a meeting and still carry on.
It's not gonna hurt us to wait till next meeting to approve the minutes.
Yeah, that's what I put in there.
Thanks. All right, so, Kevin, any thoughts when you were working on this?
Absolutely, there are many thoughts. If you go to the New Hampshire Department of Education website, there are a number of different programs that are available if you just click on there. It's definitely changed tremendously over time. One of the, I guess, variables that you have to take into consideration here is in larger districts, there are many more opportunities to go within districts. So if you were in Manchester or in Nashua, you're still within that district, right? And Manchester is obligated by state law to pay for all of their students to get educated. So they can do some of those words that you see, intra-district. There are a lot more opportunities for choice. Even in Conway. Conway has 3 different elementary schools. They have what's called an elementary school choice policy. So if you are at John Fuller in that residing district, but you would like to go to Conway Elementary School for a variety of reasons. Your child care is right next door, you work there, whatever it happens to be. You can apply through the policy, and it talks about doing it in April and March. And, if there's availability, you can do that. Jackson, you're kind of a one-stop shop here, just geographically. You have Jackson Grammar School, so there's no real other public school that you can option through. There are public charter schools that have become more in vogue here over time, and those are open to all New Hampshire students. The one piece that you have to take a look at is the tuition aspect of things, especially when you get to the middle and the high school level. And it's kind of complex in terms of what specifically is the question for Jackson. And I think those are going to be some things, as you dig a little bit deeper, what are those pieces that you want to have, right? So there's no real carte blanche. You can just take the money and send it here, there. The other towns have to agree to it, right? That receiving district would have to agree to those things. If you want to go outside of those public schools, there are many more options. You can see the Learning Pod, you can see, the education freedom accounts. So as you dig a little bit deeper, there are definitely some pieces related to that. And then they're still figuring out those things. So, no, they're there. There was questions about magnet schools versus charter schools. Tried to answer those as best as possible. And it really is kind of the wild west of public education, to be honest with you right now. So you just want to get as much of an understanding of those things as possible. But however you decide to move forward for middle and high school, because you don't have one here, it will involve some type of school of record and or some type of tuition agreement. Okay, so that has to be there. You have to have one of those in place that guarantees a spot for Jackson students to get educated publicly. Does that make sense?
Maybe. So a little clarification.
Yeah.
If we opt out of the contract,
That's correct.
and then we tell Kennett we want to send 3 kids there the following year.
Ken would have to agree to that
I thought the
contract.
state would make that. I was always under the impression they wouldn't have a choice, and then they would set the tuition rate. No.
No, because they would have to agree to that. You always have to have a school of record. If Conway said, no, we don't want to educate Jackson students. Gorham said, no, we aren't interested. And the state would probably weigh in at that point, and they would say, okay, we're going to work with Conway and or Gorham or whoever, Freiburg. Well, Freiburg, they probably wouldn't,
Out of state.
because they're out of state, right? Their obligation would be in state. But eventually, you're going to have an agreement with a school district to educate your students in grades 7 through 12.
So let's just say we opted out. We didn't have a school, we went to the state, and we said, we don't have high school. What would that process then look like?
I have no idea.
No idea.
They would probably say, why aren't you going to either Gorham or
And
Conway?
we said we haven't been able to come to an agreement with Conway.
Yeah. And they'd say, why not? And they'd probably go to some mediation of some type. I think, there are different ways to get around that. I don't see that not happening. You just might not like the conditions at which those things are given to you. But that's why you want to move toward an agreement.
I was just I wanted the answer to those questions to know what we had going for us when it came time to negotiate with Conway.
Yeah.
If they knew already, well, even if we say no, the state's gonna step in and this is gonna happen anyway, it might help us negotiate with them.
They would probably tell you to stay put with what you currently have in place
Yeah.
until you can figure out something else. I would imagine. Because you don't want to do without a home.
Yeah. So, I don't know I don't have an agenda from you, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn on that.
You're fine.
I guess, not being part of this committee yet and sort of being out of the loop for a while, I guess regardless of which school we choose, I would hope that the families could still have the option to say, no, I don't like it, I want to go to Kennett. And I don't know how that would look, or what that would look like. My sibling already goes to Kennett, I want my, I'd like their sister or brother to go there as well. I don't know how that would look.
Kevin?
So Hale's location, they're the unincorporated town of
Yeah.
Hales. They don't have a school in their, they do have agreements that for K-6, 7, 8, and then 9, 12. So a few years ago, and this is what happens with these little towns like Hart's location, Hale's location, they have 2 kids here, 3 kids there. What they decided to do was say, the students that are currently at Kent High School, we want to grandfather those students in, but anybody new moving from grade 8 up, we want to go to Friday. But then that's changed as well. It usually is dependent upon those 1 or 2 families and what their needs are. That is usually what it comes down to. Is, like I said, Hart's location for a number of years didn't have any children in the schools. And then they had a family move in and certain things were really important to them. So then they optioned to go back to Kennett.
Then they went to Bartlett for a while, and then Kennett.
Yeah, they go to Bartlett,
I mean,
because geographically it makes sense.
I remember years back, though, they would do Bartlett and then Freiburg.
Yeah,
Well,
And then they switched.
historically, there was one family there where the one child went to Kent and then the 2 other children went to Freiburg.
right.
And that was all because the contract, their agreement with Kent ran out, and they just said, we'll set, and Freiburg agreed to take them, but I don't know what the.
And Kennett too. So Kennett has a policy in place, Conway School District for high school, and that's what they do. is the agreement is whatever the highest, based on the tuition formula, whatever the highest tuition rate is, that's what they can accept students to. And
Which
it has
is
to be-
basically the rate we pay.
I don't know, you guys leapfrog with freedom sometimes, and Eden, it changes, depending upon the population.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
I think I know the answer, but the school of record does not have to be a public school. It can, so Freiburg was the school of record, it could be a school of record?
So,
I'm just asking.
there's, right, public academies, okay, that's a special category, it's not a private school, it's recognized as a public academy. So Pinkerton Academy down in Derry is a public academy. I think there are a few different schools that are there. So they have to be recognized by the state in order to be an independent school is different.
Well, they must have done that with Freiburg, the state of New Hampshire must have done that with Freiburg in the past because they allow children to go.
Chatham has been required
Right.
to go there.
Thank you.
They have for 70 years.
And Kevin, to Keith's point, as long as we're talking about the school of record question, what are the reasons that Kenneth might refuse a Jackson family that wanted to send their child to Kenneth?
I'm just hypothesizing.
Politics would be the only reason.
Well, so budgetarily, and Jerry, you were around, previously during the area agreement, and this is what happens with Chatham. They pay, and they have a small population, they pay for the services of the current year. So let's just say that you're paying in front, you're budgeting, and then all of a sudden a family of 4 or 5 move in, right? That wreaks havoc on Jackson's budget as well as Conway's. Now, 4 or 5 students doesn't make that big a deal, but let's use Albany, and they have 45 students. And if there's no agreement as to how many students or how that's going to go, that could wreak havoc on Conway as well, from a staffing standpoint, from a budgetary standpoint as well. So sometimes, that's why they originally put in the tuition contracts 90 to 95%, depending upon which level of the students, because then we can account for that number of students and pay for those in real dollars. That's, because Chatham, to be honest with you, they budget a few students here and there, but if they have a family of 4 or 5 that move in, that really changes their tax rate in their because they're paying, like if I budgeted 8 students to go to Freiburg Academy for this year, 8 students at, let's just use $20,000 a year. So there's $160,000 in the budget for tuition to Freiburg Academy. And then if you have 4 other students that move in, and that does happen, that's an additional $100,000, okay? That if you have your reserve fund, you can draw from that, right? So the tuition trust fund or something like that. If you don't, it could be, and then if there are special services that are with that, okay, so that maybe another $100,000. That's big money, and that changes the tax rate tremendously. It happened in Albany 7 years ago.
Well, I think I can understand why it would affect the county budget of Jackson, where how many kids need to be enrolled in high school and what services they need. But I'm still curious to know what are the reasons why Kennett High School might refuse a Jackson family who wanted to send their child.
Oh, I don't think they necessarily would.
So if I just went knocking on the door and said, hey, I want to send my kid here, do they have a policy for that?
Do they have a policy for what now?
So we do we take in students from out of district. If let's say I lived in Freiburg and I went and knocked on the door at Kennett and said, hey, I want to pay for my kid to go here. Do they have a policy on that?
They do. But they don't have to accept students, right? can, but they don't have to.
And, slightly off topic, but am I correct that you do not need to transport high school students in the state of New Hampshire?
You don't.
You don't.
I would argue that that would be, I don't want to say discriminatory, but it would really harbor hardships on your economically disadvantaged students.
Yeah, and I guess I was more asking, getting way ahead of the
Yeah.
game, and asking that, let's say that we made agreements with all three schools. And said, here you go, you pick the school, we're only busing the one.
What smaller districts do is they will actually pay mileage, like Hart's location. We aren't gonna run a bus up to Hart's location to pick up high school students and then drive them on the way back. So what happens is Hart's location parents actually transport their students to Josiah Bartlett Middle School, and then they get picked up by the Bartlett bus and brought to, but the parents can submit for mileage for those students. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, no.
There's a lot
Hey,
to
this
it.
is the country, I guess.
I have a question too. Are we just kind of bouncing around? Is that
Well-
the questions, concerns? I have one, but I'm not going to put it where it
No,
That's what I did.
No, what we began with was Keith's joined the committee. Did you know Sasha?
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay, so Keith's late to the committee, and so he was just asking for some clarifications on the questions on the matrix. So that's kind of where we began. And then the next thing we did for the other people that just joined us, on the 29th of December, Malcolm Badger is going to host a group of youngish people here in the evening, just kind of chat with maybe some college students, young people that might be home from college or, live or work in the area that are not away at college, and just kind of do a conversation with them and make a social event. And he's willing to do it again the 5th of January, which is also a Thursday, at 6 in the evening. So we just kind of thought that was a good idea. And then just to give you a little more background, what I found with Jessica and a little bit with myself is that, people are coming up to us and asking us questions out in the community. And so we're trying to do, I would say almost like one-on-one mini focus groups, so to speak. Getting the opportunity to answer someone one-on-one. I did the community potluck here a couple weeks ago on a Sunday afternoon, and I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't prepared to, but there were community members, and I know Emily Benson was talking about all the, the things that they do for emergency management, and then Barbara Campbell was talking about survey they're doing for these facilities and stuff. So I raised my hand and spoke, and I, just so we're getting the name out there and having the opportunity to, speak to folks. And we made a connection with the school. Maybe when Erica comes, she can tell a little more about what we're getting it on their news. I gave them a paragraph to include in their newsletter, and getting out so that the parents in the school. So. That's kind of a little bit of
It
the,
would be great to hear from those families that would be impacted by having kids at two different schools. If we
well, we talked,
Sure,
we
we can
thought we
identify
really,
them now.
so we did meet with the 3 people that are presidents of the PTSA. And we kind of agreed that we were in the early stages when we met with them, and that we would wait until January when the holidays were settled, and we had some more information, and then maybe they had some more thoughts they could gather. And they promised they'll, get out to their, their friends and talk to them. So definitely, I did speak to the faculty one day over here and talk to them because we want their input.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get out to the community. Sasha?
I guess that kind of leads me to my question. I mean,
Yep.
the data collection piece
Yep.
of this work.
Right.
I spent a bunch of time with the matrix that we all created, and
Yep.
actually just sort of cross-referencing sites for just Gorham High School, because that's part of my research.
Right.
And one of the things that gave me some anxiety, and I'd love us to figure out how to deal with this as a recommending committee, is that we're taking notes in this matrix right now. And if you go through and you read it, the notes are kind of all over the place because they're in the vernacular of the particular author. And the sources of information are all over the place. I actually started putting in some reference notes on mine, not because I need it right now or Darlene needs it, but if the ultimate trajectory of this work is to put forth a recommendation in front of this community at a school meeting. Everyone in this room has been there for at least one version of preschool and one version of facilities that's been kiboshed because there have been questions about details on information. So where did you get those numbers? And who said that? And where did this opinion come from? And right now we're building the database that's going to inform those recommendations, whether that is stay the course and here's why, or that's Gorham Freiburg and stay the course and here's why. And this community is really smart, and they're going to hold this committee and the board's feet to the fire and say, cite that for me. How many AP classes? Which ones are they? Where can they do dual enrollment? What internships? And I'm really concerned looking at the matrix right now that it's all good work, but there isn't the rigor that comes with like academic research applied here. And that seems fine now, but what's going to happen is that this is going to move along and we're going to have some conversations and some interviews, but if there isn't consistency and that rigor and those cited places where this data came from, the community is going to say, nope, we're not, I mean, I can't say that for certain, but I have sat in this room and listened to them pick apart some really amazing work. And it was all because they wanted a fine point on the details and no one could provide it in that moment. And I would hate for all of the people sitting here to spend hours and ask the community to spend hours interviewing, doing like focus group conversations, planning surveys, and get to that moment and not be able to have the data stand up on its own. So I'm happy to talk about ideas for like revising our data collection process, but the way we're doing it right now seems really, really fraught.
That was kind of the first thing I said when I came.
Yeah, you did.
Cool. Sorry.
Jerry?
No, I didn't go to the detail as you did. I was just, with more meaning, I thought the questions were very vague and not specific to each.
And we don't also have consistency. We've said, hey, it'd be nice to find some alumni perspectives and some, I happen to just be like compulsive in the way I gather stuff like that, and it's like administrator, principal, parent. But if we're not all following the same script and collecting that data, then we're gonna end up with a data set that's all over the place and incredibly biased. And anyone that wants to is gonna be able to stand up and make an argument that supports whatever their perspective is. If it is that Freiburg is the be-all and end-all, they're gonna find a way to make that data speak to that. Or Kennett is the be-all and end-all.
Because it's not the same for everybody either.
Right, exactly. And because we're not following the same procedure for how we're collecting it. And I worry that it's awesome that Malcolm wants to have these conversations, but if alumni perspective is important, then that needs to be an organized and facilitated conversation that goes through a series of questions, the same ones for every person, they all answer them. Demographic information is captured, and it's reported that way to the community. And I don't know if we can handle that as volunteers, but I think it's really important that we don't waste time of this group or the community in bringing them something that can't stand up to that kind of scrutiny that this room is really good at putting under really great ideas.
So,
Jerry?
I think the points, Sasha, that you make are good ones, and I think that part of the problem is, I don't know that the board has kind of segmented or kind of set up the process well enough yet for the subcommittee to function really well for what it needs to do. Because, you know, one of the things I wanted to ask in our board meeting tonight, and I can ask here too, is what is the process of this committee and what's its goal? And if the goal is to make a recommendation to the board where to send our kids, that is not at all what I thought this committee was going to be about. I thought this committee was going to be about exploring what our options are, not advocating for one option over the other or finding out from parents or students where they want them to go, but literally just exploring what are our options. Is Freiburg Academy an option? And what does that look like? How much is it going to
And
cost?
then delve into the details after.
How much is it going to cost to send our kids to Freiburg? What's the busing? Like getting all the details of sending our kids to Freiburg. A, is it possible? Is Freiburg willing to do it? Okay, what does that look like and what does it cost? How does it operate? Gorham, is it an option? And if it is, okay, what does that look like and what does it cost? Is Kennett an option? Okay, what does that look like and what does it cost? Is some sort of amalgamation of all of those things a possibility? Okay, what does that look like? And how does that process even begin to work? So I would think that that would be the first part of the step. Before alumni, people like me, businesses in the Valley, Conway, or any other interested parties start advocating for certain things, I think the first part of the process would be understanding what does each
What's
one,
feasible? What can we actually do?
what can we actually do? And then, once it's known, okay, this is what sending kids to Freiburg is going to look like. This is how much it's going to cost. This is what busing would look like. This is what sports would look like. Having all the details about what each of our options actually are, now you can actually have a more informed and reasonable argument when different groups start advocating for specific things. To do that part first, to do that along the way, before you fully understand the details of each option, to me, wouldn't be the best approach. Because to me, the first thing is what's feasible and what does it look like with each of those options.
Like,
And
and I guess for me, I would like to know right now, to Conway, hey, let's be the first one out there that asks, and let's say, hey, we're not gonna renew this contract as is, we would like a contract that doesn't require us to send X amount of students. Is that something you give us? If so, tell us what that would look like. I mean, that's the first question I would ask Conway.
Well, my concern, so to your point, Jared, and to your point, Sasha, and I expressed this a couple of months ago to the committee when I came, is that it seemed like we weren't gathering apples and apples from each place. We were really focusing on getting information from Kennett students and feedback from Kennett students, but not from other schools and students. So if you're gonna compare alumni feedback, you have to compare alumni feedback from all the schools that you're doing, or don't bother.
We weren't,
Then find out the basics.
Right.
No, but it was even back then, like, oh, we're gonna get, Kennett to talk, which is great, but we also have to get Freiburg to talk, and we also have to get Gorham to talk.
right.
So, but I agree that we just need the basics at this point, and I don't know, and I think that Matrix is good,
Right,
but we just needed to get populated as well.
it's being populated, so
Yeah,
I'm not sure Jerry has seen the Matrix, so are we get into, Jessica
good.
is the author of the Matrix, so going from there, what was listed, I don't know if I have a copy on print a copy, but she can show you that. So basically what we're trying to do is make sure that the people that we're delving into, each of the schools was using, I tried to answer them too, so I found it a bit frustrating myself to fit in to those things that were there. That said, there is no interest in just asking Kennett students at all. I've had a conversation with a parent from here, daughter from Freiburg. No, we're having conversations with students from all the different places. We just happen to have a young person that offered, they've got some connections with high school kids. It doesn't mean, kids that they knew through high school. The kid was from Tamworth that I met at the fire department. I don't even know where that kid went. The kid's a fireman down in, his last name was Priest, youngish kid, real tall, skinny kid. But anyway, he just knows kids in the community. So we were kind of using Malcolm to kind of reach out. But he's certainly not our only source. Erica knew people at Gorham, so we were trying to reach out to as many people.
And
I
is it-
have no bias to Kennett. quite
And is
honestly.
it your, correct, and maybe it's changed since the other meeting that I attended, was that it was the impression that this committee was gonna make a recommendation.
That's what we were tasked with. That way I can get, just to clarify, but that's what we were tasked with, that on May 15th, we would then make a recommendation to the board based on the information of the options that we had looked at all, and we had agreed to look at 4 particular schools, and then considering all the other pieces and any other options that there were.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was, I can't
So
remember how it was, and I think that was a mistake on the board's part.
So that's what
Because-
they've been tasked with, in finding out.
But also, can we just clarify something that Jerry asked for, and I just want to understand if this is the school board's directive to this committee is to gather information in this way, or continue doing what we've been doing. Because what I heard is a request for really quantitative information that is comps on each of the schools, like a profile that has some very specific, and I didn't hear qualitative, I specifically heard you say, weight on input from alumni, weight on input from the community. This isn't about testing a concept. This is about gathering apples to apples profiles of any of the schools you would consider. And when I hear that, that to me like is a very rigorous approach, right? So we would agree that we're going to gather that data from the same sources, because if you go to look right now for the ratio of students in Gorham to teachers, you can find, it took me half an hour to find 4 different ratios, and they range from 7 to 1 to 17 to 1. So I don't know, I was tasked with Gorham, cool, so I picked one of those sources and put the information in there. That's not good information. And so if we're doing what you ask, then I would say that we say, okay, we want quantitative information on these 4 schools. We talk to the superintendent and the principal and 1 parent, but the same 3 people for each of the schools. Not, oh, the head of school said they talked to me, or Sasha had a friend that was, parent or a school board member, but that there's rigor in the approach to the data collection, so that when we go back to you all and say, here are the 4 samples or the 4 profiles, we can stand behind the data as real-time data, verifiable, and from the same sources at each of the places.
That's what you get on that, and that's part of what does going forward look like. And I say that in broad terms, the details is what goes in that information, what it looks like for sure. So all that data is absolutely necessary and important to make a decision, but I guess what I think is the board made a mistake with was looking for this committee to make a recommendation on where we should be sending our kids, because if that information is going to be, so the way I would look at that is that if that information is being presented in May, as a board member, that information would mean nothing to me at all. It really will, because I really want to know where is that's a very big decision for a very small group of people to be making. It's more of a board level decision. And I would envision a different process. To me, it would be once we collected all the data and we understand what education is going to look like in each of our options, then we need to expand that out to a broader discussion and a broader way of looking at it. So if I hear a recommendation from that committee, like, hey, we think we should send our kids to Kent, or hey, I think we should send this committee thinks we should send our kids to Freiburg, as a board member, and more importantly, as a Jackson community member, that'll mean absolutely nothing to me at all. Because to me, the process and how the community is going to decide where we send our kids is going to be bigger than collecting data on what the options look like, and with a small group of people saying this is what we recommend the town do. To me, the process would be more, and that's what I'm saying. I think the board made a mistake because something we did task them with doing that, making the recommendation. I don't understand that part of it. It's like, to me, the important part is collecting the data, collecting all the information, presenting it to the community, and then through the school board making a decision on that. Because again,
I don't think they're far off from, there's still, either way, they still have to collect all the information, whether they make the recommendation or
Well,
not.
I don't know. Like, for me, as a board member, if I was here when this happened, I would have recommended before we do, and I hate to say wasting our time, but before we do any of this, I would have wanted to reach out to our few options and said, hey, is this even possible?
Well, that's
And what would that look like? And then if these 3 places say, yes, I'm sure we can work something out. Okay, now let's delve into it a little deeper. We might come out and say, Kennett's our best option, and this committee at the end.
They're doing that.
That's what they did,
Yeah, but
just what you said.
They already went to those schools.
Yeah, we already know their options, but now,
Kennett as well.
yeah, we already know all the schools that we're
Well,
looking
certainly,
for.
that's an option. We're fairly in contract with them.
Well, let me rephrase that. I meant to go ask them, what would a contract look like? And the biggest reason I ask that is, I don't like the fact that we have to promise to send a certain amount of students. And would these other schools let us enter into a contract where we weren't guaranteeing the amount of students?
Peter?
Just a couple of points in terms of ancient history and in current history. Starting from the current, I think you make an interesting point, Keith, that the current contract as it sits does not sit well in a lot of the towns.
No.
For a variety of reasons,
I
whether
would
it's
say
average
yes.
daily membership, whether it's equalized valuation, that's gonna be a point of negotiation. The last time we went through this, the board did all the work in looking at the alternatives. The 3 board members, there were 3 of us at the time, it was not fun. It was a lot of work. And we were, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, still, there may have been some implicit bias there, if it was the board's decision. So I think there is a value to having another group of people either bring options or bring a recommendation forward, because it gives the board a little bit of cover, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, if a facilities committee comes up with a list of options and a recommendation or not a recommendation, ultimately it's going to the voters anyway. The board's not making the decision, the board's gonna make a recommendation. Yes, we agree with the facilities committee, or no, we don't. But ultimately, the contract, if it's under a contract, is going to go before the voters at some school district meeting in March. So there's a step, hopefully everybody's in lockstep, but maybe not, but that's part of the process. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I think Peter made a great point about just my understanding of how the process works, that ultimately the decision lies with voters. And so it seems to me that whether it's the board that's making a recommendation to the voters or the committee that's making a recommendation to the board that then makes a recommendation
So,
is,
so it really kind of depends how you look at it. The only option that the voters will have is what's presented to them from the board. So we don't ever have to give them the option of a contract with Freiburg. We don't ever have to give them the option of a contract with Gorham. We don't ever have to give them the option of a contract with Kennett. But at some point, the board's going to make a decision about where we're going to send our kids for high school. And there most likely will be a contract involved with that. But it's not like we're going to offer to the voters, here's a contract with Kennett, here's a contract with Gorham, and here's a contract with Freiburg Academy, you guys decide.
Pick which
The
one.
board will decide where we're going to ask the voters to approve our budget for sending our kids. And if it happens to be a multi-year contract, the voters will also have to approve that. But ultimately, it's the board that decides where we're going to send our kids. And if we say we're going to send our kids to Conway, and Conway requires us signing a multi-year contract, then the voters will have to approve that contract. And if they don't, it's not like, okay, now we send our kids to Freiburg. Now the board has to figure out.
Now we have to get the state involved.
Now we get the state involved, and the state's going to decide that for us. The decision actually isn't the voters and where they go. That's actually the school boards.
Yeah, and the point of the committee and the school board was also to have some listening posts with the community at large once you found out the information, to educate them as to why we were doing this again, because there's people who still don't know. And then also the work that we've been doing and why we're recommending whatever, to go to the school, or whatever option we choose, to go to the school board to come to the town. So it wouldn't be, it's not like it's a closed loop. I mean, we're trying to be as transparent as possible.
But if we
These
don't
meetings
give
are all
I think
open.
where Jerry's going, if we don't give the voters an option to vote on it, they kind of have no say. Well, they're only going to be able to vote on the option that we as the school board recommend.
Well, that's what they'd have to say is in these public listening
Yeah.
posts. And here, right now, I mean, these are all open. You know, I mean, these are open meetings and they're all welcome. They're posted all over the place to come and talk about this and learn about what we're doing. So that's the point, and that's what I wanted to make sure as a school board member, is that we tried to get the public as involved as possible throughout this process. That's why we have community members we're supposed to have on the committee. So that, you know, we have committee members also working on this, community members, not just school board members. So it's supposed to be a,
But a lot of the data that we'll want to know as a board and present to the
Yes.
community is things like, it's not just what's in that matrix so far as what the learning environments look like, as much as it's going to be, what is that contract going to look like? You know, so as Peter said, the contract it never sat well with a majority of the Jackson voters. And I would argue that that's mostly because we didn't educate the Jackson voters enough on what our options really were. Because you can hate that contract as much as you want to, but there is nothing that's ever going to change the details of that contract. They're pretty much 90% of what's in those is there's no options on. It's like, that's the contract, you have to live with it. And the fact that people think otherwise, that, oh, we can do this, that, or the other thing, we have to educate the voters that those aren't really options. It's like, if we send our kids to Freiburg, this is the contract, this is what, this is what it is. And Freiburg might be willing to give us a contract for 1 year, or every year, like, hey, every year you can renew it and decide whether you're gonna send your kids or not. Freiburg might be agreeable, that sort of thing. Conway might be like, no, we want a 20-year contract if we're gonna take your kids here. And that might be something that's important for the voters to know. It's like they might want to know that, hey, we can send our kids to Freiburg for as much as we want to, or as little, for as long as we want to, or for as little time as we want to, and they're okay with that. Gorham wants our kids for 10 years. Conway wants our kids for 20 years, or Conway wants our kids for 3 years. Gorham wants our kids for 6 years. Those are things that those are the kind of details that voters are also going to very much want to know. But we also have to kind of expand out who we're reaching out to, because this thing is going to be important to people that are also outside the school community. Businesses are going to be it's going to be very important to businesses and what their input's going to be. And non-parents are also going to be very concerned about how we're spending their tax dollars. That importance of what contracts are going to look like is going to be one of the things that voters are very, very interested in and knowing about and having the information from. So not just knowing that, hey, Freiburg Academy's learning environment looks like this. It's like, well, what is a contract going to look like then? And the more that we can educate the voters is that there's not a lot of wiggle room with those. It's not like a lot of negotiating for what a contract with Conway is going to look like. There's not really going to be a lot of negotiating with what a contract with Freiburg is going to look like, or what would look like. And as long as we give them that information, like, hey, this is relatively what a contract with them is going to look like. Conway's going to be difficult because it's again, it is a long-term contract with them. It's not going to look that much different than the one we currently have. And that's one of the things that with the co-op committee was struggling with, the fact that the idea of getting some say in how our tax dollars get spent in Conway and Kennett is, from a fundamental standpoint, even Conway agrees for the most part that it would be nice if we could have, if there could be some say there, there could be some representation behind the tax dollars. But our reality is, no matter where we send our kids, we don't get any say. We don't get any say with what those learning environments are going to be, no matter where we send our kids. And if that's one of the biggest problems with Conway, is that, hey, we don't get a say. Well, we have to understand, wherever we send our kids, we don't get a say, period. That's our reality. Our reality is that we're going to pay what they ask us to pay, basically. With Conway, it's the state's told us what it's going to be. With Freiburg, it's going to be Freiburg telling us what it's going to be. With Gorham, it's going to be what the state's going to say we're going to pay. And it's going to be 65-35. That's what it's going to be. Whether it's 90%, 80%, or 50%, that's where there'll be some wiggle room. But in reality, we're not going to negotiate much from those things.
Well, I agree with you. I think
Peter has
Peter.
Go ahead, you finish your thought.
I think you make a great point, and I think that's why it's particularly important to evaluate the schools on their merits and to be able to confer a recommendation that at least has that as part of the recommendation. Now, I hear you that that there are dollars and cents associated with those recommendations, and I don't think there's anybody who's currently on the committee that doesn't understand that as well. And it sounds like you as a board member would want to have specific information about those dollars and cents implications. That's completely legitimate. But your point about the lack of representation, to me, is just even more proof positive that understanding what the environment in the school is like is really crucial to the decision for everybody in Jackson.
And that's from a parent's viewpoint. And the viewpoint from a business person, particularly people like in the real estate business, is going to be completely different.
I think everybody likes to get good value for their money, whether they have their kids enrolled in school or not.
Oh, absolutely. But it's when Peter mentioned the fact that people are, the common contract didn't sit well with people. It's more because we didn't educate, the board at the time, I was on it, we didn't educate the community enough to know that it's like, you don't like that in there. You don't like what we pay per student for Conway. But there's actually reasons why that is. Particularly when you look at it from the standpoint of, we're a community here, and it's not just Jackson, but we're part of a greater community here. It's like, yeah, we pay a lot per student to Conway, and we might be able to spend less per student if we send them to Freiburg, but if we send them to Conway, we'll probably be paying just as much per student. But there isn't options on what we pay per student, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's, to me, is like one of the comparisons to Freiburg is that it's, that's the only thing that's going to be different there when you're talking about just dollars. Is that Freiburg might be our cheapest option. And the voters are going to want to know that, but from my viewpoint, I think that they'll want to know it, but they'll also have to understand why one is one way and one is another. And that we didn't do very well, because if we had done that well the first time, I don't like the fact that we pay too much with Conway, and that we don't get any representation, particularly when and the biggest thing with representation at Conway isn't really sort of representation. It's like, well, they offered this class one year, and then the next year they didn't. And that's what has pissed parents off more than anything. The two things that pissed people off about their contract was the fact that we paid way too much per student, if you look at it only from that viewpoint. And then the other biggest gripe with parents has always been, or the first one is just the gripe of everybody in town, all taxpayers. But the biggest gripe for parents is that class is no longer offered. And they come to the board and say, why isn't that class offered there anymore? And that was the anger with the contract. And that just, again, reflection of we don't have say. And that's why it's important to know that we don't have say in Freiburg and we don't have say in Gorham. So if your gripe is going to be the fact that that class is no longer offered, then
we can't pay teachers enough.
Yeah, we
That's
can't
why
pay.
we can't retain teachers because we're not paying them enough. We have to seat at that table.
And that's why, to be able to bring it all back to here's the data on what the learning environments are like is going to be extremely important. It's just at what point does that become part of the discussion and the process, so that you're moving the process along in a timeline that actually makes sense for people to have the best understanding of what each of those learning environments is going to be like. And that's, to me, the first part of that is understanding what is our option and what is it going to cost, and what are the contracts going to look like, and how long term are they going to be. Then you can start making rational arguments about, Conway is spending this much per student, and they fluctuate too much in what they're offering, and we want more stability in what courses and what the learning environments actually look like. Just as a sample, so then you have an intelligent conversation about that, but you can't have that until you have the kind of nuts and bolts of what's going on.
Peter?
I agree with some of what you said, Jerry. I agree that we're not going to have a whole lot of say once the contract's signed. We're going to send our kids somewhere and we're going to pay. But that being said, I think a contract, I can't speak to Gorham because I don't remember. The overarching thought, though, is that the educational environment today is vastly different than it was the last time we went into a contractual agreement. The people want choice and options. That being said, we're not going to please everyone with a contract. There are going to be people who are happy and people who aren't. The three things I always heard about the existing contract with Kennett was three things. It was the length of the contract, 20 years. So that was a long time. It was the equalized valuation and ADM requirements, mix. And it was the minimum number, as you spoke to Keith, that we had to meet, the number of kids that we had to send. So those are all things that could be in the mix. I think a contract with Freiburg, you're going to see a very different thing. It's going to be, here's the price. When I look at Freiburg's website, it was like going to buy a car in a sense. The base sticker price is $18,000. If you want the add-ons like special ed and this and that, and there's a fee to play sports, and there's this and there's that, it adds up. I want air conditioning, but it's going to be more. So I think you're going to have a very different look at a contract in terms of length of time. I know in Hearts, they were going year to year at certain points. So I think that's why it is gonna be a real apples and oranges comparison, but, you know, the culture and the environment around how we're educating our kids as a community and as parents is very different than what the last time we went through this. So I think we need to bear that in mind as you go forward with talks with Conway, because there is some, I won't say wiggle room or some leverage and some negotiating, but I think there's some clear eyes on both sides that could see a way to come to a fairer tuition agreement if that's the way we're going to go. Last thing I'll say is I don't think it will be exactly the same as it was the last in every way, shape, or
Yeah, and on that, I'd like to see us be proactive and go to Conway now and say, hey, you know, we're not gonna renew the same contract. Is it even possible for us to have a contract that does not require us to send X amount of students? Maybe they say no right off the bat, so now we know we gotta do our homework a little better. If they say yes, it would look pretty similar, we can do that. Okay, we'll talk about the details later. Then we go to Friday, and we say the same thing. You know, what would a contract look like? Can we send 1 or 40? Does it matter? And then I think if we find out we have 2 or 3 of those options, where we don't have to lock ourselves in, I think the best option for this community would be to give options. You want to go to Gorham? Go ahead, go to Gorham. Gorham will send us the bill. You know, you want to go to Kennett? Go ahead, go to Kennett. He'll send us the bill. And back to what Peter said, you know, education has changed nowadays and it's so diverse that just because the committee or the school board thinks that Kennett is the best place to educate our kids, this other family might think, well, now Freiburg has way better options for my child. I'd like to go to Freiburg. So we're never going to make everybody happy. So I would like to find out, is that even an option before we even try to go forward and lock in on going to school? Because if that's the case, if we can give all of our students an option of 2 or 3 different places, and it's, you know, money-wise, it's not going to be a huge difference, why wouldn't we do that?
Those are great points, but Darlene, you probably remember better than me. I'm kind of like a dollars and cents guy, and so I sort of would go towards like, what does it look like on paper? What would the contract be first too? But Darlene, I feel like I remember that we talked about that in one of the early meetings and kind of decided that a little bit of work needed to be done in order to potentially like look at schools and potentially eliminate some of the schools as considerations before taking the next step to kind of think about nuts and bolts of the contract. So I feel like the sequence of operations that the committee has taken came from a place, a strategy around that of not wanting to put the cart before the horse with exploring the specifics of the contract. Am I remembering correctly?
Right, we didn't, you know, the contracts we were kind of leaving, we thought there was negotiations.
Yeah, so at the full board meeting, that was kind of the task to go back. The other groups, all 8 different towns in one meeting here, to take a look at what current facets of the current agreement do you like and which ones don't you like, right? I think everybody's kind of going through this soul searching process here, right? So yeah, I get it. You know, Jackson saying, hey, we're paying $32,000 a year to send kids to Kent High School, whatever it is. Albany pays $15,000 a year to send kids to Kent High School. How does that happen? Well, your tax rate is $6 per 1,000 for education. In Albany's is $14 per 1,000. So, you know, Jerry, and we've talked about these things, absolutely going through that process of vetting those things out is extremely important. You know, I think you're right. All these towns want to have what's in their best interest. There's no big deal. You had a 20-year agreement because you were building a brand new high school. Right, the bond will be paid off next year.
Until they ask for another one for the.
Well, they might.
5-year maintenance plan. They
But regardless of who it is, those are the things that you have to ask. I think that's part and parcel of, okay, does Jackson, if you go to Freiburg Academy or Gorham, are they going to upcharge that cost for capital improvements or not? Can we expect to be part of a bond moving forward? I mean, those are all those were all pieces. Just going back to the original question, right? Because I think that was important. The essential question was, what is the best option for Jackson students for high school? That was the question. That was the charge, right? And then it was going to be the committee will collect information for the school board to review. That's what it was. So for this group, that was the charge, right? Okay, we're gathering all this information, presenting the findings to the school board. That was
And
bad.
that was for May 15th, and then the school board had at least a year to act. And then the idea, my understanding, was the information that this committee gathered was then given to the greater board, and then as the board, we were gonna have to take that information and put it into it, and work on the contracts at that point.
Yeah.
Sasha?
I wonder, well, two things. The first part is about just getting a little more consensus than what I'm hearing tonight from the board. Your board has changed in the time since that meeting happened. You're a tiny board, and you have a new board member. And also, you have one member who's not here tonight, but there's varying perspectives in this room on the charge of this committee, on the data that you want collected from this committee, and I think I can speak for your community volunteers. I think we want to do right by you, and we also want to use our time well and get information to the community that is grounded in fact and methodology. And there's also, in addition to the differences in your perspectives tonight, I'm also hearing very different approaches in the methodology for how we collect it. Some of them were, let's approach the schools first. And Keith, you said this earlier tonight. You said, well, have we approached the schools and asked them if they're interested in working with us? And there was a yes, but I just want to raise my hand. In terms of my data collection, I'm not going to anyone in Gorham or Freiburg and saying, hey, do you want to work with Jackson? I'm saying, we're a committee that's collecting information on your school. So that's a really big difference in terms of a directive from the board to the committee. Because you're suggesting that we approach that conversation as, hey, this might be a relationship we want to pursue. And what I heard as the person tasked to go collect data was, go collect data on this school. So it would be really important for there to be clarity for those of us who are, and to decide if that's the directive, hey, we want to actually talk about this like it might move to a contract, then are we the appropriate people to be collecting that data, or should it be a school board member that's having that initial conversation? So I guess I would just maybe like to make a recommendation that we sort of pause on our data collection or like moving this forward. Because the other concern I have is that right now there are plans for a month from now, there would be a public-facing activity where we're bringing together alumni to talk to them and go through a series of questions about their experience to inform this committee. And I'm hearing from school board members tonight, like, wait, we're not there yet. So as someone serving on the committee from the community, I feel like I'd like to hear more consistency from the school board to know that when we're putting ourselves out there, that we don't look like a roving circus, because we get one shot to deliver this to the community. And if it looks like it's a hot mess, they're gonna see that and feel that and say, we don't like what you're selling.
But the message clearly had been, what you did is exactly what I did. Freiburg, I'm collecting information about your school. I got the person in one of the offices.
But
Paul
there's
Kennett.
a
But
real huge
He
difference.
just
of
got
opinion.
here. He
But
just
it's
literally-
Jared's perspective too. There's a difference, there's a major difference of opinion in the 4 board members that are here tonight in terms of what we're doing,
Right.
who we're talking to, and I didn't hear any clarity on what we're asking. So we don't have questions in this matrix. We have a bunch of
Right.
pieces of data, and we've been pulling that together, but there's not consistency in what we have here.
I would agree with you.
So, Sasha, I hear everything you just said, and I would say, first of all, you haven't wasted any time on doing any of that, because it's all part of the process. What it is it's not just a lot of levels to this, and that's kind of what you're describing there. That doesn't negate or make one part of that, one of those levels any more important or less important than the others. From my perspective, and it's possible that maybe my thinking has evolved, but I never heard that original, the committee's going to come back and give us what our best option is. I literally want to know what are our options. Is Gorham an option? In other words, would Gorham accept our kids if we wanted to send them there?
Yeah.
Would Freiburg Academy take our kids if we wanted to send them there? To me, that's the very first thing, because if Gorham's not interested in in taking our kids, what difference does it make what they offer for an education
Yeah.
there? If Freiburg's not willing to take us, so the first question to me to Freiburg or Gorham would be, hey, we're exploring options on where, Jackson's exploring options on where we're going to send our kids. Is there any point in us talking to you about that? Because to me, that before you start worrying about what the education experience is like, you gotta know,
Make sure it's an option.
is it an option?
Yeah.
Because to me, that's what I want to present to the community, so that when we talk about like, when we decide as a board, this is where we're going to try to sell the community, and where we're going to send our kids, and people come up to us and are like, well, did you look at Freiburg Academy? Did you look at Gorham? Did you look at Woodlands Academy? And to be able to say that, yes, we did. And I don't, I want to know at some point, like, can we send our kids as a community? Can we send our kids to Woodland Academy if we wanted to? Like, that's the thing I want to know as a school board, is it an option or not? Because right today I don't know whether it is. So before I start worrying about what does an education look like at Woodlands Academy, I want to know, like, if I was going to send my kid there, it's a different story. Like, that's outside of public education. And to me, so like, that's the most important thing. The first step is it an option? And if it is, okay, get some details on what that option would look like. And again, we're not going to solve the problem with what the Conway contracts are. If we send our kids to Conway, we're not going to know what that contract's going to look like. I can tell you it's going to look almost exactly like it looks right now. But there aren't really options there, and there aren't going to be options for Gorham, and there's not going to be options for Freiburg Academy. They're going to tell us this is what you're going to pay, and that's what we're going to do. And as far as all three of those places, you know, the only one where we're going to have some say in it is with Conway, and what the contract's going to look like. But it's not going to be much different than what it currently is. And that's the one thing we'll have to educate you, but that's a different story. The first part, again, is just, is it an option or not? And if it is, then we can start to, then it's important to collect the data on what is the learning environment there. But the biggest difference, I think, between where the board is, the only thing that's a little bit of a glitch is just me at the moment with the ideas. I wasn't looking for a recommendation from the committee on where we should send our kids. I was looking for the committee to present us with, here's what the options are, and, you know, relative details about how much, like the nuts and bolts of what's it going to cost and how's it going to work. How are we going to bus our kids to Freiburg? How are we going to bus our kids to Gorham? How are we going to bus our kids to Conway? How does it actually work? If it is an option, what does that option look like? And also, can we send our kids, if parents want to send their kids to Gorham, so middle school kids, when I was in middle school, okay, parents could send them to Bartlett for middle school or to Conway for middle school. It was an option for parents. And as Keith's saying, is that something that's possible with high school? Like, can we send, hey, I want to send my kid to Freiburg Academy, I want to send my kid to Conway. Is that going to be one of our options? And that's the information I want up front to know before I can put together an intelligent assessment as to where is the best option for our kids. That's when, like, the information that's in there becomes extremely important. And so it's absolutely necessary to gather that information, but out of the blocks, the first question we normally should be, is there any point in us talking to you?
I mean, so we might want to take, as a board, now that we've unraveled a little of this, the information that you're gathering is essential. All those questions that
At
are
some
on
point,
there that
it'll be
I
used.
worked on, it is essential. And I believe that everybody is amicable to having us. As far as Freiburg has said yes, that they would love our students. Gorham, I'm not so sure, but we can take one step back, and myself or Jerry or can call, we can call and just make sure and say, you're going to be hearing from our committee if you say yes, you know, are you open to this? And if yes, that's fine. Then we go in the gate and start the conversation again. My question would then be gathering the same information, the buses, the sports, the extra schools, like Freiburg sends some of their kids over to Conway because they don't have a tech side, you know, that, so those types of things, we want to know all, what are you getting for your money, for your education? And if we're going to send our kids to A, are they going to get everything that they would get at B? you know, that type of thing, and is it worth the cost difference of that type of thing? And then there is a whole new level that's out there, as to Woodlands wasn't an option before. And then Kennett has their requirement of how many percentage of students that need to go there. Probably still gonna be in the recommendation, and then there's all the new vouchers or whatever that's out there for options. You know, what does that entail? So you're gathering all the same information, whether you make a recommendation to the board or not, you still have to have the same information.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's just a minor
Step two
detail.
now, instead of step one.
But it's just a minor detail as to like, now you're just not making the recommendation, you know what we say, but you still have to get all the information.
Like, don't let my thinking throw a monkey wrench into anything. 'Cause
No,
I'm just one
But I
person.
like
I
The
still
rest of the board
making
knows what it's
sure.
doing, I don't. There's nothing wrong with that.
But
But don't let it
I've looked at your, you know, you guys made up a great, you know, Excel spreadsheet of all the questions that we want, I think those are great. My concerns were, again, that we have people from Kennett coming in to do specific talks on Kennett, and I don't see that with the other schools. Whether you have them now or in May, doesn't matter, because I don't see them coming in with the other students. So I want to make sure if we're going to compare apples to apples, we're comparing apples to apples, that's all. So I don't want to sway one or against the other if we're not doing that with everybody. So I think that's an added step that may not be needed at this point, because we don't have Freiburg and we don't have Gorham or Woodlands, because we can't, you know, alumni. But getting all the basic information, getting the yes, getting the cost, getting the classes, getting the buses, you know, all that stuff, and saying, okay, here we go. And then we do have to go back, and if Kennett says they want 90% of our students, 90, like they have now,
And I think that's one of the first
how are we
things we
gonna
should
do
do.
that?
We should-
Well, then they can do
Yeah.
that, because that was not the
Right,
beginning of
we
this
can do
process.
that as a board.
We were told to
As a
look at
board,
your school.
yeah.
We can do that, but the
Yeah.
committee still needs to gather all the information that they're
I
gathering.
kind of disagree.
Well,
I mean,
you know, we've been
know.
doing this for
If
4
you-
months.
I know.
We've been doing it
And
for
that's
4
why I don't
months
want to rock
now.
the boat, but I mean, I guess the first, from a board standpoint, before we tasked the committee to do anything, I would have liked to have had those answers. Because then we would know, have a better idea what the task is. I would have said, as a board member, before we even formed this committee, I would have said, how do we reach out to Kennett and say, hey, we'll sign that, you know, we'll recommend to our taxpayers to sign that same contract if you remove the requirement how many students that we have to send you. Is that a possibility?
That's gonna have to be a different process entirely.
Well, that's what I mean, I don't know how we would get that answer.
So like, again, like, I don't know everything, but as far as the purpose of this committee and what it needs to present back to the board and to the community, I would say it's very safe to say that whatever contract we have with Conway, whether it's a 2-year contract or a 20-year contract, and why we have it that way, it's going to look very much like it does right now. So for purposes of when we're talking, if someone's trying to sell Kennett or talk against Kennett, using the current contract as what it will probably look like and what it will cost us is a very safe bet. Thinking there's going to be something else, that we might be able to negotiate something else in the Conway, you're going to be spinning your tires in the mud a lot.
So you think their answer would be no if we said?
It's not just what their answer is, Keith. So and that's part of the things that, and hopefully the committee that we have formed on discussing what the Conway contracts will look like, this kind of pain is gonna be the first 6 months of it, or the first year, like, where Bartlett thinks you're gonna get this, Tamara thinks you're gonna get that, Jackson thinks you're gonna get that. I know we all think that, I know we all want that. At the end of the day, we're not gonna get those things. It's gonna be, and it's not like just because Congress added it as this, it's not just Congress saying that. Again, this is backed up by court precedent, okay? What's gonna happen is, it's all backed up by law and what the state has already said. That's why it's gonna be 65-35. Conway wants it to be 50-50. Bartlett and Jackson want it to be 100% ADM. And because that's already been fought in court, okay? The court has said, if you don't agree to anything, it's going to be 65-35. So of course Conway's going to be arguing, we want 50-50, and Bartlett's going to be, we want 100%. And by the way, we only want to send half our students, and our other half students are going to go eat the other place. That's what, it would be nice to have that kind of flexibility. But at the end of the day, none of those things are leverage. Conway doesn't care.
I'm not asking for leverage, I just want to know to Conway, we got 35,
But
40
if
kids.
you're going to negotiate something with Conway, okay?
I'm not even negotiating. pay you the same amount of money, take that out of the contract, is that even something that they would even consider? Take that one piece out.
They wouldn't consider it because they don't have to. They don't have to consider it. And so why would that? And that's just it. It's like I said, like everybody wants different things, but it compromises what is going to be the end, right? What everybody compromises on. And wherever you don't compromise and you ask the state to intervene, the state's going to give you what we have now. So the idea that we're going to get something different than what we have currently, I promise, is not going to happen. So this committee doesn't need to waste its time on that. This committee can rest, I would say, can rest pretty easily on the fact that Conway's contract is going to look like this, and it's going to basically cost us the same in the future as it does right now. So it doesn't need to do a lot of research and work on that, and think that maybe we'll get different kind of contracts. What this committee, I think, was
So
going to spend.
how does that start?
Rather than kind of looking there, so if this community wants to know, can we send our kids where we want to as parents, okay? It's what would a contract with Conway look like then? That's the kind of thing that this community would look at.
That's what I was saying. Like,
Is Conway willing to say, like, yeah, we'll take, because Conway might be like, send out as many kids you want. We're still going to be 90% of your students is what the contract's going to say. Or maybe they're willing to give us different things like that. That's a different story. But if you're talking about just a long-term contract with Conway, it's going to look like it does now. What it looks like if we decide that we're able to send our kids to different places. Whether it's a good idea or not isn't the first step. The first step is it possible or not? Once you determine it's possible, then you want to start arguing the merits one way or the other. And my understanding of what the community will be doing is what are our options in reality? Like, is sending our kids to different schools a possibility? I want to know that as a board member. And how do we find out that answer? And has this committee figured that out yet? Like, not the answer, but how to get the answer. In other words, like, do we know that yet? So before I want to know, like, what does the coursework at Friar Academy look like? I would think it'd be more important for the committee to decide what are our options. Like, literally, like, is sending our kids, because you keep bringing it up, it'd be nice if parents can send their kids where they want to go. Is that an option?
yeah, that's what I was saying. Let's start there.
And so the questions might be to Friar, like, do you want all of our kids, or do you care how many kids we do or don't send to you? Friar Academy might not care. Conway might care. Gorham might care. They might not. I don't know, but that's the information that I would want to know.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what I wanted to know right away.
For the sake of time, we have 10 minutes and we need to be done. Sasha, comments and then,
Yeah, I just want to just sort of raise the flag again that I think it's a really great conversation, and I'm really, you're not like the wheel coming off the bus. Like, I think that there's clearly some conversation that the board members need to have together about, sure, if we're grabbing like report card statistics and US World News stats on the schools, great, let's keep populating these. But if we're going to make a call to the superintendent of Gorham Schools and ask for an hour of his time, I want to make sure that we're asking the questions that you get answers to, because what I don't want to have happen is to call Dave or Kevin or any other superintendent 4 times to be like, whoops, just kidding, the last time we called you, we didn't ask for the stuff we really needed. We asked for a profile of your academic situation or your athletics, which is great information, but if that's not the first layer of information that you all need, then it would be really great to slow down and say, what are the 5 questions? How many phone calls do you get a day, Kevin, with Kevin's time and Dave's time, or a school board member from Gorham with his time, that we're using that time well to get the information you all need to then go to the next layer. And what I feel like I'm hearing over and over tonight is that stuff in the matrix is valuable, but I think all 3 of you have said in various ways, but the first things we want to know are this, and that's actually not the material that we're collecting there. So I guess I'm
Like
just,
you said,
when we did this-
material collected could be a few
When we did this the
months.
last time,
yeah.
those first questions were informal ones to Gorham. They were informal to Fiber. And Kevin, you probably know this. It's like they understand how these processes work, how difficult they are, how layered they are. So when Gorham gets the question, are you an option for us? They're going to know right away. The superintendent or the principal up there is going to know right away whether it's an option for us or not. First, is it an option? Yes. Okay. it's an option, or no, it isn't, don't waste your time. I'm pretty sure Gorham would want our kids. Just like the last time they wanted our kids, and it was an informal question, like, are you going to be an option for us? Like, yeah, we'd love to have your kids there. Freiburg was the same way. Freiburg actually gave us the number the very first day we asked them
Very low
informally.
number, too.
That's helpful.
It's like, it was 16 and change. And we would charge, next year we would charge you 16 and change. Next 10 years, it's probably not going to go much one way or the other. Was their answer from our informal question up front. So it's
And
not
then we
really-
going to give us a discount based on we were paying a bond or something, right?
What's
I
that?
remember there was something that they were going to give us a lower rate when we finished paying the Conway bond off too. They
Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But that was before we had one, so, we know Conway wants us, or we know we can be part of Conway if we want to. The only thing we don't know is unofficially, is it worth pursuing more information out of Gorham and more out of Freiburg? And I would be really surprised if those schools weren't like, yes, we're absolutely an option for you. And if it ever gets to the point where we start needing to get into details, we're more than happy to go through that kind of part of the process with you. But to ask them up front, or some more of the time, they're not going to care that much because like Gorham knows we're not going to send their kids there. So they're not, they don't casually, they say, sure. They know we're not going to send their kids because they don't care.
Okay, but just to be clear, so as the three of us as representatives from the community are making phone calls to folks like superintendents and principals, that you would like us to ask as a board, you would like us to ask first, would you be open to negotiating a contract with Jackson to send our schools there? Is that a question you would like, because that's
I
really,
wouldn't ask it that way now.
okay, well, how would you like it asked? Because
Kevin can do it for us. I don't mind doing it. I don't mind calling up there and just asking them, hey, is this an option? It's really kind of an informal question. It's like, the details of the contract, again, like, those
She's not
things.
even asking for
I
details, she's
know,
just saying.
but would you do, because it isn't negotiated contract with us, that negotiating part of the contract is really insignificant in reality, because it's gonna be what it's gonna be.
but you all want to know first. You don't,
Would
the
you
way
be
we've been
willing to take
operating is,
Jackson
can you
Street?
tell us a little bit about your school, right? If we look at this matrix, which maybe you all will do, tell us a little bit about your school environment. Tell us a little bit about athletics. Tell us about what kind of academic rigor and special support exists there. It isn't a conversation that begins something like, are you open to this discussion that might or might not be formalized? And so I'm wondering, as the person going out and having these conversations, and James and Erica also, is that the question that the school board would like us to start with? Or do we stay in this space of, hey, I'm gathering information to put together a profile of your school? I feel like those are two very different starting points for conversation. I don't operate, and I'm not a superintendent, maybe it's not, but I feel like
You may want to start the conversation with, I'm being tasked as a subcommittee to gather information.
that's exactly what we've been doing.
Right, and to add to that is to say, our assumption is that you would be open to receiving Jackson students at your school.
But
Is
here's
that
the thing,
clear
we've got
enough?
4
And that's what you have
people.
to say.
I'm not comfortable saying to Sasha, go do that, James, go do that at your school, me, go do that. You're gonna get 4,
Well, yes or no, like, yes, we're open or no, we're not.
Well, why is possible, like, so if Bartlett were to do that, that's a wholly different story. Okay, they got so many kids that they'd have to think about it more. The amount of students that we have, Gorham doesn't have to think about it. Freiburg Academy doesn't have to think about it. They're like, yeah, that's great, we'd love to have your kids there. Gorham's thinking about the same point, because that just means that saves their taxpayers money. That's why they want us. Freiburg Academy, because they probably, to some degree, it's not just the money they want from us, they would like to have Jackson kids in Freiburg Academy.
Some community.
And that's kind of their motivation. The answer is going to be yes, but if it's no, we would want to know that up front so we didn't waste our time going through the other part of the data collection. It's that simple to me. It's like, why waste your time? Why waste your time trying to sell something that isn't a possibility?
So could the
And am I
school-
talking to somebody who's actually
I know
authorized to
you
say
all have
yes?
another meeting in 5 minutes. Could we take that request back to the school board at your meeting to discuss if you want us because you're 3 board members and you've said contradicting things, Darlene. I heard you say you wouldn't be comfortable.
I'm not so
starting
sure
a
that I want,
conversation
that
with
wasn't the purpose of the committee to go and that we were not at that contract stage. What we were doing was gathering data.
Right.
And gathering the information
table it
and
till the
becoming as
meeting.
knowledgeable.
And maybe, and
as
give
we
Micah an
could.
opportunity if she wants to weigh in on it, and then just give us some direction. I think all three of us would be happy to carry the water whatever way you want it carried, but I think that it's important that we carry it consistently.
Consistent, because
And-
I'm worried
yeah.
about consistency,
And
giving the
just
same message.
and she's doing the same thing.
Right.
But I think your work is valuable, and I appreciate what you've done. And it's
Gather
not
whatever
your
data you
decision.
want, I just want it to be useful
Right,
and
it's not
credible when
wasted.
you want to use it.
Right.
All right, well, thank you for coming.
Sorry, darling.
That's all right.
I
I'll
I
file
feel
my
like I hijacked the
resignation.
meeting. I swore to God I was gonna come to this room and not say, just sit here and listen.
Never works, Jerry.
Great.
I'm
Next,
really glad.
yeah, it's great that you had extra time tonight.
Good, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, how are you?